So what is the difference in the paradigm or difference in the approach? Let me illustrate using one recent example, and I'm sure all of you may be aware of. So you know Apple has recently launched iPhone 17. Many of you may be using, or maybe the previous version of iPhone. Now look at what Apple did. Apple launched 4 different versions of iPhone 17. You know, the version iPhone 17 Pro Max is, you know, this is the price currently in the US market. Now, if you see, for example, the top end of the iPhone is priced at about $1,200 US, whereas the base version of the product is priced at about $800 US. And you can see, for example, that when you're moving from the top end to the base version, invariably there is a decline in the functionality. The processor, display, battery, I've included on these 3 features, but if you look at other features, you will find that proportionately they're declining. So usually you have any multinational or launching any product, they have 3 or 4 or sometimes more variation or variants in the market, and these variants basically vary based on the price and then based on the functionality they are offering. Now look at any other, it's not about phone, any other product, be it any durable product you can think about, television, refrigerator, automobile, or any tech product, you will find usually multiple variants are being launched. Look at, for example, automobile, just for comparison or just for illustration, you can see a Lexus, Toyota Lexus. These are the variants currently available in the market, and you can see the price, you know, from $97,000 to base version of about $40,000 US. Now, in all cases, functionality varies. As price is coming down, so is the functionality coming down. Now, what exactly this is indicated? So so this is basically if you wish to build a framework, usually you will find that on an average, in general, you have 4 variants being offered. The fully loaded version has 100% performance, and it's of course priced at 100%, means premium pricing, super premium pricing. And then you have other version. You have 90% performance, and then 90% price, then 80% performance, 80% price, and then the base version has about 70% per price and the 70% performance. Now, if I plot it in the form of a graph, for example, this will look like this. So many of you are engineering students, so I'm sure you know the linear relationship or a straight line relationship. So if you look at here, the underlying assumption is that there is a linear relationship between performance and the price. Means if I wish to offer you 100% functionality, I will charge you 100% price for that. And if you want lower prices, I will reduce the functionality proportionately or accordingly. That's why it's a straight line or close to a straight line relationship. Now, this is how I develop products. This is how I launch product in the market as a Western MNC. This is the mindset I have. However, I know that when I'm going to launch these products in the developing countries, India, China, or maybe Africa, South Africa, or other countries in Latin America, I know that very few consumers in those countries can pay me this price. Even my base price, 70%, very fraction of the population actually can pay this price. iPhone, of course, is different. iPhone is a real big market for Apple in India. Maybe they created that social prestige or other pull in the market, but even now, only a small percentage of Indian population can afford Apple, for example. Think about other product. Maybe not more than 2 or 3% of Indian population can pay Western prices, or the prices at which typical European or North American consumer is buying these products. So therefore, most of the consumers cannot pay me that price. So what is the alternate for me as a multinational? Now what I would do, I would offer a new product. This is a new product, but this is a scaled down version of the product, or a de-featured product. De-featured product will have 50% price, means I need to make it real affordable, so half of the price which I typically charge. But given the mindset I have, given the linear relationship I see in the performance in the product, I would reduce the performance to 50%. So now I have a product for Indian and Chinese at a 50% price, but proportionately I have reduced the performance to 50%. Now this is how most multinationals were operating when it comes to emerging market innovation. They were de-featuring, scaling down the products, and then trying to sell those products to developing countries' consumer. But in general, if you look at the history, if you look at the data, most of these innovations fail to gain acceptance or gain adoption in these markets. Why they fail to gain acceptance? One reason is, of course, that even 50% is too high for emerging market consumers. Indian and Chinese can't pay even the 50% of the price you have for the American consumers. Second, the moment you reduce features, the moment you launch a stripped down version or the scaled down version, then that product is no more acceptable to these consumers, developing market consumers or developing economic consumer, because even though they can't pay the same price, but they have aspiration to buy exact same product. Because in the globalized world, I know what exactly is being offered to a European customer or what is being offered to American customer. So the moment I see I'm given a different product, I don't necessarily accept that. So therefore, those innovations or those products to fail to gain acceptance or fail to gain commercial success. Now what? So this is the traditional paradigm for product development. However, companies realize that this needs to be changed, and I need a new approach for product development. And what is that approach? Now that approach is known as frugal innovation, type of innovation or a new process of developing innovation. Now the idea here is that I need to come out of this mindset of seeing linear relationship between price and performance. And essentially what it means, look at here. The objective now here is not to compromise the performance or reduce functionality, but offer exact same functionality, but not at a 70% price or even 50% price. I need to bring down the cost to 20%. So you have 100% performance and 20% price. Means it requires a dramatic reduction in the price, or very steep or significant reduction in the price. And for that, I need an entirely new approach, very creative, very different approach of developing product. Now, if I can do this, then this becomes my frugal innovation. That I'm achieving dramatic success in the price reduction, but without compromising, without reducing the functionality. So let us see, this is 100%, but we know that 100% may or may not be always possible, but at least I can be in the range of say 60 to or 70 to 100%. Or the product should be similar to the one made available to European and the American customer. So this is the frugal innovation, high performance but ultra low cost or low cost product. Now how exactly I will do that? So the approach which Indian and the Chinese MNCs or the subsidiary Indian and Chinese subsidiary of MNCs or the Indian or Chinese local companies are following or demonstrating is actually shown through this process model. So for example, as I said that the starting point is defeaturing. You attempt to bring down the cost by removing feature, but this doesn't work most of the time. So the next, it gave way to a newer approach, as I was saying, frugal innovation. But frugal innovation requires a new way of developing innovation, and that process is known as clean slate approach or a zero-based innovation. Now what is zero-based innovation? I will demonstrate using an example. But once I do that, once I have dramatic reduction in the cost without compromising on the functionality, then I'm successfully developing this product. Like as an Indian company, I'm developing this product for Indian consumer. Or as a Chinese subsidiary or Chinese companies, I'm doing this for Chinese consumer. But eventually there's a possibility that I can take these innovations to other emerging market. Like from India, these innovations can flow to China or Russia or other countries. So we call this as a horizontal innovation flow, means from one developing countries to another developing countries. Now this is logical or this is intuitive because the price-based challenge or the economic condition or economic cost and consumer face in these countries are more or less similar. So that's what many companies did it. But eventually we are seeing a new stage or a new outcome in the market where these innovations are gaining acceptance in the Western world, in the North America and the Western market. So this can of course have different approach. For example, it can be sequential, that I'm developing local innovation, frugal innovation, then taking it to emerging market, then eventually to European and American market. But in many cases, some of these innovations can directly be taken to the developed world. Now why this is reverse innovation? Because historically people thought that innovation would be developed in the developed world, rich countries, and then eventually they will flow to developing countries. Means Europeans and Americans will develop or design innovation and eventually they will be made available to Indian and Chinese, for example. But of late we are seeing reversal of this trend. increasingly Indian and Chinese companies or other developing countries companies are innovating, and then they are gaining acceptance or adoption in the developed world. So this is a reversal of innovation flow, and that's why this concept or this phenomena is known as reverse innovation. So let me explain you using an example. So look at this. So anyway, in our research, we attempted to find what drives, for example, all of these intermediate stages in innovation flow. For example, why companies do the defeaturing. And we found that local subsidiaries, for example, they need to adhere to the practices and protocol of their parent or a global headquarter. At the same time, they need to respond to the local need, and that creates some kind of tension. We call this as a dualism. For example, I need to adhere to the global standard, global protocol or practices of my headquarter, but at the same time I need to respond to the needs of Indian and Chinese market, and that creates all the tensions. So this is why they resort to defeaturing, but that eventually led to clean slate approach, and then companies doing frugal innovation. For that, of course, they need to very actively work with consumers, so co-creation or partnership with the different entities in the market, deep dialogue with the consumer is needed, and they scale up, they take it to the other developing countries, and for that you need to sometimes add new features, you need to create brands, and eventually in the last stage you are taking these products to the developed world. Now of course developed world require new features because there are unique conditions in those markets, and you need to understand those conditions and add those features in your product, and then you can make them available to these consumers. So let me give you an example of that, but before example, let me discuss this or illustrate this using this framework of innovation. Different types of innovation, be it a reverse innovation or local innovation or trickle down innovation. So let us see, you have developing countries or developed market and the emerging market. Now innovation can be designed and developed in either of these sites or locations. Similarly, the consumers can be either the developed market consumer or emerging market consumer. Now, as I said, historically, the innovation was flowing from developed country, means of course developed country companies were innovating or developing new products for their own consumer. But over the period of time, they started as part of their globalization or localization or internationalization strategy, they started eventually taking these products to developing countries, and as I was saying, that consumers, they can't afford or pay the price they usually charge, so they eventually defeature the product, scale down, or with a lag they introduce these products. So that's phenomena is known as trickle down, means after a while, slowly, gradually, you will make these products available to Indian and Chinese. So that's the first approach. However, as I was saying, that the companies eventually realize that this is not helpful, this doesn't work most of the time. So you need to create local innovation, means if you wish to win Indian market or Chinese market, you need to innovate there. You need to empower the local team there. So when you're doing innovation there, so that you can serve the local market, that is example of local innovation, or local or frugal innovation, or even you can say local come frugal innovation. But as I was saying, that this is increasingly happening or seen, that the products you have developed for these developing countries or emerging markets, now they're gaining acceptance and adoption in the developed world. And this is a reversal of innovation flow, and that is known as reverse innovation. So let me give an example of that. What is reverse innovation with illustrations? So look at the product high-end medical devices. The product I have right now here. So you have a Mac 5500 ECG machine. This is a premium product, usually sold or normally sold in the Western market, or in developing countries, high-end hospital. Corporate hospitals typically use this product. This is quite expensive. The cost of any ECG machine of this type, 5500 for example, or equivalent, maybe more than 5,000 US dollar, maybe 5 lakh or 6 lakh plus in Indian rupees. Very expensive, not many hospitals can afford. Now this is, and secondly, this is a very bulky machine. You need a cardiologist, you need a trained technician. This is not the machine which GPs can use it, general practitioners can use it. This is not the product which you can take to the rural areas or semi-urban markets. Now what GE did it, for example, they realized that this product will not work in the rural and the semi-urban markets in India, where 75% of the Indian population lives. So they decided to develop a product exclusively for this part of the market, and this product was Mac 400. Now, as you can see, this is a small portable machine which you can put in backpack, and this is at a price of 1/5 of the price of this product. So damn cheap, you can say. It's extraordinary reduction in the price. Usually in Indian rupees, it may be ranging from 50,000 to about 80,000. Now, not just the price, you're making several new features, not necessarily reducing features, but you are actually adding features which are needed in this market. For example, in rural India, you don't have electricity or regular electricity, so you need a battery backup. You have GPs, you don't have cardiologists, you don't have trained technicians, for example. So you need to make it real robust machine requiring very little service. It's a one-touch machine, so you can using just one based on the traffic light concept. You can press one button and then your ECG is generated, and then you can easily interpret the disease using this. So this is the example of emerging market innovation. Now this machine you can carry with you. If you're rural doctor, going to remote locations for diagnosis or for treating patient, you can just put it in your backpack and carry it with you. That's why it's portable. Now what GE did eventually, this product was originally developed for India and China, but eventually they realized that there is a real big demand for a product like this in the European market and also in the Western market, because one reason is, of course, portability is a desired feature. Even in those markets, sometimes you have accident sites or you have population living in remote areas, so portability is a feature. You need ease of use. You need machines which can be given to GPs, for example, or you need machines which can actually, which can be used which may not require trained technician, which are stable, for example. Very little need for complex service requirements. So they found that they started exporting this product to outside India, and this ended up becoming real big success. So when you are converting Mac 5500 to Mac 400, this is frugal innovation, local innovation. But when you are taking this innovation to the Europe and the North American market, then this becomes the reverse innovation. Of course, in those markets, you need USB port, you need several additional functionalities. So you need to add those functionality, keeping in mind the local requirement.